She really appreciated you. It was a great interview, except for one thing. There was a spot on your t-shirt.
What?
There was a spot on your shirt, and I was like, is his nipple leaking, or what is that?
It wasn't a spot. It's the logo.
It looked like a spot that was like coming out.
No,
Oozing.
no, it's the,
I was distracted by it. It was like, it should be up here, not down here.
no, it's right. It was right there.
And I thought, what is that? I wouldn't wear that shirt again.
Well, I almost wore it right now for this, so I'm happy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Mychal Bryan podcast. I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, and joining me today all the way from Shampoo Urbana, no, hold on, I'm saying it wrong. Joining me today all the way from Shampoo Banana in Illinois is my dear teacher and mentor, Lois Steinberg. Lois, thank you so much for being here.
I am very happy to be here. Always happy to be here for you, Mychal.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here, Lois. And today I am super excited about the conversation that we're going to be having. But before we get there, for those of you who this is your first time joining us here on the Mychal Bryan podcast, this is a podcast where I bring you interviews from yoga teachers, mindfulness-based leaders, and spiritual practitioners from all around the world so that you can find out not only about how their practice is impacting their lives, but also how their practice is impacting the lives of their students. So if you want to continue to be a part of the magic and the momentum that we're building here on the Mychal Bryan podcast, do yourself a favor, go down below, like this amazing video because I can assure you it's going to be great, but also subscribe to the Mychal Bryan podcast wherever you find us on the internet. And as always, share this podcast with your other yoga and mindfulness loving friends because more and more people need to hear about the amazing work of teachers from around the world like Lois. Now, Lois, once again, I'm super excited to have you here today because today we're doing something new on the podcast in celebration of the month of May, which is an amazing month, not just because that's the month that I'm born, but also because it's a month where we celebrate our mothers in general. And this month, I thought that it would be a wonderful thing to have you come on the show and talk to us about yoga for the various stages of a woman's life. And I know that this is something that you have spent a great deal of your life and a lot of your personal time being invested in. So before we dive into the content of our talk, Lois, I just want to find out from you, what is it about yoga for women's health that has always been so important to you? Why has this been such a big deal within your life and your practice?
When I started practice, I wasn't aware of taking care of myself in terms of my monthly cycle. And all my practitioner colleagues, no one was aware. This is very early on, like in the late 70s. And one time I was coming home from a 3-week retreat with 2 other women, and we were driving, and one of my friends said that we had done back bends that day before we left. And she just mentioned, I have my period, and my period stopped. During the class, when we were doing back bends, my period stopped. And it just, I remember that. And I was like, that's interesting. But I didn't know anything. And none of us knew anything. In Pune, they knew everything. And Guruji knew everything. Guruji knew everything about how to help women, and not even being a woman. He understood the life cycle. And my first year in India, I remember him helping one of his top students through their first pregnancy. Every day she'd be in the practice hall and he'd be helping her. How would he know about pregnancy? How did Gita Ji know about pregnancy? She would know about menses, but these stages in a woman's life were first outlined in Yoga, a Gem for Women by Gita S. Iyengar. And so being in Pune, I learned, you have to do a separate practice. And I felt good from it. Some people rebel from it. When I practiced yoga, I was getting strong. I was getting strong. I was getting flexible. I was, being able to have a lot of stamina. It made me feel powerful. And then to make sure that you have to do a separate practice for however long you're menstruating was really a foreign concept to me. But I came to love it. I came to love getting my period, which is an unusual thing because for people it would, generally interfere in your life. And in this culture that I grew up in here in the States, you'd see commercials on the TV, wear this pad or, use this tampon and go horseback riding, go swimming. You can carry on with your normal life. And this was encouraged. And, and here I'm in another culture where I rebelled against a lot of what I heard. I read a book called The Red Tent, where women had to, sit in a tent while they had their period. But how I understood it, and this actually wasn't written by an Indian author, I think it was taking place in the Middle East. But, I learned from Gita Ji that, she has all these sisters in the household, and sometimes they'd all be menstruating but her, and she'd have to do all the labor in the household because you weren't really allowed to do anything. You had to, remove yourself from doing any manual labor, and which was just completely opposite to how we're taught here. And so there's a little bit of a rebellion. I can do anything if I have my period. Why should I be held back? And it got associated with, being dirty, like you shouldn't touch these people. But the not touching was to protect them. It was like our form of social distancing we have now, so that when you're menstruating, you're more susceptible to possibly having more chance of getting ill. And so this was so foreign, but I ended up, I didn't really rebel against it because doing the practice of the forward bends and the supine poses and other associated things that help you with your period, I felt good. So I accepted it. I didn't rebel against it. And some women I would see would rebel against it. They'd be in the classes in the Institute. And, in the beginning of the classes, they organize the class. So people with certain conditions have to be arranged on the outskirts of the class so the assistants could help them. And not just the menstruating woman, but anybody who needed special help. But also the menstruating woman had to sit in this particular place between the two columns. And if sometimes you'd have to expand it to the next column. And actually very few Indian women would be there during their periods. I think they just stayed home. They knew better in a sense. But so, you get this kind of heavy feeling before the period comes, and you can get a load on the brain. Even with a healthy period, there's an energy change in your body. Your hormones have changed, the uterus is shedding its lining, and you have to give a little time out for that. And I think it also just helped. Well, first of all, yoga practice in general, just having a yoga practice, establishing it, if you had trouble with your period, a lot of times it would just resolve if you had excessive cramping. And I've had students with severe endometriosis, and they just start any yoga class and it just gets better. I know that because some people, they get better and then they disappear from class for a few months and then they come back because they got worse. And so it just helped. And I enjoyed it. I looked forward to getting my period. Now, as I got into my 30s, I didn't know that my family had a history of thyroid issues, that there was some genetic component, because when I developed Hashimoto's thyroiditis, my mother said, "Oh yeah, I have it." And then we looked at the family album, and it showed that it was her father's side, that one of the sisters had a very large goiter. I didn't even know that, like I had known this great aunt, and I didn't know what that thing was on her neck. So there was a history, and now we know more. Like, actually, my mother didn't know she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis because they didn't have autosomal antibody testing. It's an autoimmune disease that eats the thyroid, and it can eat other organs too. And I had one of the most severe cases because Guruji saw it 2 years before I got it diagnosed. That was the genius of Guruji. I had spent a year there, my first year, and he had obviously come to know me very well. And when I returned, just day one, he said, "What happened to you? Look at what happened to you. Something's wrong with you. Can't you see you have fluid in your body?" Which is one of the symptoms. I didn't see I had any fluid. And then he worked with me. He didn't know I had a thyroid condition. He knew I was unwell, but he worked with me so much that it actually masked the symptoms. And I was also working 17-hour days, which didn't help anything. And for 9 years, I worked 17-hour days. I was pretty much a wreck, and I was numb in my body. And I would ask my neighbor, make sure my lights are going on and off, there's activity, if not, check on me, because I would wake up in the morning unable to move. And finally, when I got tested, I just went in for a regular gynecological exam, and there was an astute nurse who said, "Stay here. I'm doing a blood sample." She just saw it too, because at that point I looked, thyroidy. And she said, "You can't leave until we get the results back," even, because she was really afraid, and she rightly so. I had the highest TSH levels they had ever recorded in the history in this town. It was over 350. Going above something like 14 is considered high. And anyways, I'm not going to go into that story fully, but when you get thyroid issues, you start producing excessive amounts of estrogen. And estrogen grows things. And it's no mere coincidence that we have a lot of women with fibroids. In fact, just yesterday in class, people were asking me about fibroids after class, what to do about them. And one thing is, I know in the African American community, they have higher rates of it. I think it's like 70%. Now, it could be totally non-bothersome. They could just be little seedlings. A fibroid is a growth. It could be inside the uterus. It could be embedded in the wall. It could be on a stem and growing. This is what happened to me. It started necrotizing my organs. And there's so many hormone disruptors, as they're generally called, in our environment. The chemicals on the lawns that people put here, I don't know if they chemicalize things where you live. But I live in farm country, corn and soybeans. It's all chemicalized. You can smell the fertilizer when, you can smell it in the air. And these are hormone disruptors, and plastic contains estrogens, and we store food in plastic. So a lot of ways it can't be avoidable. So no wonder so many women have fibroids. Or when people get an ultrasound, they're like, "Wow, I was told I have fibroids. I didn't even know." Because sometimes it's not bothersome. Now, mine were really huge, and I would be bleeding a lot. And so when I went to Pune I went early 90s for 2 years after I got my graduate degree. I was destroyed. I was a wreck. And I had fibroids where it was like a dagger going into my lower abdomen and being pulled to the side. That was the feeling. And 24 hours a day, I was in such pain. And of course, with fibroids, you get heavy bleeding. And so your iron levels go down. So you're just so weak. So I definitely looked forward to my menses, but the pain wasn't going away. And I went to Pune, and Geeta really took me under her wing. And for 6 months, I worked with this trestle. So this trestle, I had to do my standing poses facing into the trestle with the feet apart. So my abdomen would be touching the trestle. And I had to learn to keep the abdomen soft. I had to ground my heels, my hands lift up. You have to keep this organic body lifting. And quite soon, I don't remember how soon after, I didn't have that pain anymore. Didn't mean my fibroids were shrinking. They were not shrinking. They were growing. I'm not going to say that Iyengar yoga cures fibroids, but Geeta taught me how to live with them. And she taught me so many things just beyond the menstrual practice, you know, being there day in, day out. And at that time, even early 90s, hardly any foreigners were staying. The practice hall wasn't that crowded. And I would practice with Geeta Ji a lot then. At that time, early 90s, Guruji was going through something, and I wasn't as close with him right then, or he wasn't close with anybody. And so I was getting to know Geeta Ji a bit more, who I was actually afraid of her more than Guruji. But she showed me so much, and I got out of my pain, completely out of my pain. And I wanted to share with the world what she taught me, because I realized it's not, you know, she needed to write another book because it wasn't in that book. Because just like Light on Yoga, it becomes an antiquity the day it's published. You know, it's a science for them. They keep progressing and learning new things and developing new things. And, you know, it was the first time I learned about cross bolsters, you know, which is how I always start my women's class, because it's a time for women to get quiet, settle down, followed by Salamba Pravottanasana. And I rest my women, and men join the class too, in the class, because it helps you to get into the parasympathetic nervous system, away from always the flight and fight response of the sympathetic nervous system. And then I kill them in class after resting them, always taking care of the menstruating woman. But so what I'm saying is, yes, when I first went to Pune, then I understood, you know, how beneficial the menstrual practice was for me and all the other women, you know, who we were practicing together. We were, you know, like having our own little group and connection with that. And, you know, aside from just like, oh, I have my period too. It's like, oh, let's do this practice together. And we feel better from it. The load off the brain is lightened up. You know, I think women listening to this would understand about this heavy load you feel on the brain. It's like this frontal load, the heaviness in the abdomen. There could be cramping, although cramping is much less when you just are become a yoga practitioner. And then I learned more when I developed my, you know, thyroid condition. Guruji helped me with that so much. And then my fibroids, my heavy bleeding. I also had polycystic ovarian system. Everything just grows, you know, when you have too much estrogen. And it's a problem for women, you know, when so many women are heavy bleeding from the fibroids, you know, it takes a toll. I could, unfortunately for me, I don't know why, but I menstruated till 57, and then I ovulated till I was 59. So I could never get my hematocrit over 7, which is a really bad number. It's very bad, you know, and I was like that for decades. But the yoga helped me to maintain my energy and survive. And Iyengar Yoga teaches you how to practice with your cycle. And especially for me, this post-menstrual practice, which is a beautiful practice that I use for many conditions. It's very good for the brain, and women who practice it, because in my book, I say, hey, do this 5 days after your period. And people are like, my God, there's never going to be a time for, practicing regularly. But over those 5 days, you start adding things in until it doesn't really resemble the post-menstrual practice anymore. But it's heavily balanced with head balance and shoulder balance and inversions, because going upside down is not just good. There'd be ways to go upside down to help tone the lower pelvic organs, the vagina, the uterus, but also the brain. Because in the brain, you have the pituitary, the hypothalamus, and also the amygdala, the hippocampus, I can't remember all the organs, but that's why as Iyengar yoga practitioners, we look at that head in Shirshasana, even Shavasana, every pose. Because if you're always tilting the head, there's organs, not just the brain, but the organs in the brain that make up the brain are going to be off balance. It's really disturbing to see people like this, and especially so in the head balance. And the shoulder balance also, and also the extension of the back of the head and neck in the shoulder balance. In fact, Nirulamba Sarvangasana with the arms up is the most beneficial pose for the pituitary, the hypothalamus, etc., because that particular pose from the Sarvangasana family, the chin is most down in the notch of the neck here. The back of the head and neck is really extended long. And when your arms are up, versus the arms overhead lifts the lower part of the spine, which you need in Sarvangasana, but the arms by the sides of the body lifts the upper part of the spine. And you can get that sense for a seasoned practitioner, first-time practitioner, no. But this extension keeps, blood vessels are made of muscles. And so it keeps the muscles here of the blood vessels, the carotid artery, everything supple, stretched, so that the circulation is going to be optimized in your head region, and the head in the center is nourished. So the hormones, the endocrine system is balanced, brought to balance when it's out of balance. And in terms of my thyroid problem, everybody knows shoulder balance is very good for the thyroid. But when Guruji asked me to do, when he was working with me medically, to do, let me see your shoulder balance now. The first day I do the shoulder balance, I get up and he screams at me, get down right now, get down. Don't do this pose for 2 months, or more. And, cause he can feel the pain in his body because my neck was hard as a rock. And I didn't know that. It was hard as a rock, which hardens the thyroid, and which that hardness restricts circulation. Even though it's the ultimate pose, he told me not to do it. And I was dumbfounded. But typical of Guruji, doesn't give it up. He's not going to let me go 2 months without doing shoulder balance. So in that same class, he rolled these Pune style blankets. You rolled one and then you rolled it into a second one and then another one rolled. And I had to have my shoulders on the thicker with 2 rolls and the thinner one, the thick roll was elbows. So he's making Nirulamba in the center of the room. And that was kind of like a progression. Later, it developed to the wall support and, using a bolster. But that was like, at that time, that was the toolkit they had. And then he put 2 fingers up to my neck and it went in to my throat. It was so soft. So the inversions are really crucial for the endocrine system and balancing. And getting back to some other things, because there's a lot of offshoots here, as I tend to, so forgive me.
Wow, Lois, that is definitely a lot in terms of your stories, and always the depth that you have from the amount of work that you did with Guruji is really amazing and fascinating. And there are several things I want to touch on in there, Lois, but one of
And
them,
Geeta Ji.
and Geeta ji, and thank you for reminding me. And another one of the things that I wanted to touch on, Lois, that you mentioned at the beginning is this reluctance that a lot of women have in terms of changing the shape of their practice in order to accommodate their menses. And you spoke a little bit about why that is. But do you find that even within our Iyengar yoga community, where for the most part, our women practitioners have this sensitivity to know that the practice should be adapted, do you still find this even amongst us?
No, because it's been ingrained for so long. So maybe even a little more than 10 years ago, I would say, when I'd be in Pune, when they would announce, in the beginning of class, if you have these problems, go to this side of the room and you'll be doing your programs. When we get to Shirshasan in the class, all of a sudden, a woman goes to that part of the class where the menses are, and Geeta would see that and say, why did you do that? Because there's the ego, interfering, that you think you're gonna, or the fear of missing out, FOMO. A lot of people only go there for a month, and it's like, why miss a whole week possibly, when they're there. And so, but Geeta really would get wild on them. First of all, they lied, and, that's not part of how you behave, with yourself towards other people, and second of all, because it's Geeta teaching. If you have your period and you're not used to Geeta teaching and you're doing your Tadasana 2000%, that's what people do with her teaching or Guruji's teaching, and that's going to harm you. So now, because I think it's really ingrained in people, they do allow people to join the class and modify. And I have taught courses many times, you participated in it, where, we go through the syllabus and how to do the pose when you're menstruating. So for example, when people are doing Shirshasan, if it's, or sorry, Adho Mukha Vriksasan, they can join the class and do some of the actions in the arms and legs in Ardha Uttanasana. So it simulates the pose. Or even the Chaturanga Dandasana. You'd be surprised that you can do Chaturanga Dandasana. As I discovered one time with Guruji, I made the mistake of practicing near him when I had my period, big mistake. And he just says, Lois, do Chaturanga Dandasana. And so I didn't want to say, Guruji, I have my period, because you're going to miss an opportunity, basically, of a lifetime. So I saw a block. I quickly put the block under my pelvis, and then I can do Chaturanga Dandasana. So there's ways to join the class. Even back bends, you can join the class. The poses that I call downward facing sacrum poses, like Shalabhasana, you can't do that. Fulcrum of the pubis down is too hard there on the uterus, so you do it on the wall. And actually, when I was doing that Chaturanga Dandasana, he was teaching me all the little fine, amazing things about that pose. A group gathered, and they didn't see I put the block, and they were like, oh my God, she's holding that pose so long. How did she do it? And then when I was done, I pulled the block out, and they were so disappointed. It's not the strong Wonder Woman they thought. But so I think now there's less of a rebellion, and especially since it's so ingrained now for decades and decades, probably 30 years, of people, knowing this is what you have to do. And I remember going to a foreign country to teach once, and they were misbehaving. They were going on their heads and head balance, which I can talk about. But so I did the same thing for years when I was going. They only did the menstrual program. They were not allowed to join until it was ingrained. And then I'm like, okay, now you can join. Now that they got the message. Takes a long time. We can be hard-headed, and I can do anything. Yes, you can do anything, and you can do more if you do this practice.
Mm-hmm.
And a few times, I went to 3 doctors who all said hysterectomy, but I was going to be damned. I don't want to get that hysterectomy. And I found one doctor who, the great Dr. Tandawakar in Pune, Sunita Tandawakar. I love her to bits. She also wanted to do the hysterectomy, but she was willing to work with me, and she saved my life. I did have to get the fibroids removed twice. They were 8 centimeters. They were necrotizing my colon, and they even were up here. And then they grow again, getting just that removed. It was a laparoscopic procedure, so I wasn't cut open, but they grow again. And then I actually had to do a shot when I was in my 50s, and there was no end in sight for my period. There it was every 28 days, like clockwork. It's like, come on already. And so she shut it down 3 months to buy time, because I didn't want to do another surgery. And it worked. But when I reached finally the very end, when I was 59 and my ultrasound showed, yes, my ovaries were shrunk, and it was a very celebratory thing for me. She was amazed. And, she attributed it to my yoga practice, So some women, I would say, yes, have the hysterectomy, because you're not going to be like me, suffering with low iron and, but, because I have that practice that could save me. Not everybody has that dedicated practice, but I'm willing to help people if they do. Now, so getting back to your question, maybe there still could be a rebellion. I don't know, but it's not overall. And the other thing is, in terms of my beginners, when I teach them, my beginner classes are youngsters, like 20-year-old people. And they're not used to coming to a yoga class and raising their hands and saying, yes, I have my period today. Youngsters are not going to do that. It's totally a weird thing. We're used to it. We've been around, and you announce to the world when you walk in, I have my period. And, I even had a man once march in. He said, I'm going with the menstrual people. And he did. He just marched in and said, I'm going with the menstrual people. And he needed the menstrual practice. So, but for a youngster, that's an embarrassing thing. Teenage girls, they're not going to shout out to the whole world that they have their periods. They're embarrassed about it. So that's one thing. And you don't want to turn these youngsters away from yoga. And aside from that, the menstrual program is actually difficult practice. It's a very difficult practice. And when I have my beginner students, I let them do everything, even though some things would be contraindicated. It's not going to harm them, because they're not really practicing yet. They're not taking it deep inside their bodies. It's when you do wrong practice again and again that you're going to invite problems. So I have them do everything except the shoulder balance. They do the Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, so they also get introduced to the concept of there's a whole world out there for women's practice. When we're in Supta Baddha Konasana, for example, I'll just say this is very good for when you have cramps. It's good for men, the prostate gland. It's good for constipation, diarrhea. I'll just include it in the list. And I'm sure their ears will perk up when they hear, oh, it's good for cramps. And so when they get cramps, they'll know to do that pose. the other thing that has happened quite frequently is young women, when they come to the class, the beginner class, they tell me before class, they feel really horrible. They have really bad cramps. All I need to do before the class starts, I'll have the other students taking their legs up the wall, because that's normally how I'll start. I'm like, okay, come here. You're going to do this. And usually it's before class, and I'm going to need a block. So they do Ardha Chandrasana. I don't bother with all the props, because they could, support their leg on the stool, but I'm not going to do that. And I just have them do Ardha Chandrasana here. Just once to the right, once to the left, hold it according to how long that particular student can hold it. I emphasize reaching the leg out of this hip, stretching the torso away from the leg. To them, I won't say stretch the uterus, to the chin, but, to get this direction of the leg going one way, the torso the other way. And depending on their height, if they were taller, they can rest the head. This is too high for me, but for me, I'm holding on my hand here and my head is neutral. It's not hard for me to keep it supported, but it's nice to support the head. And just doing once on the right side, once on the left side, boom, their cramps are gone because they're beginners. The effects are fast. I'm like, join the regular class then. And, I don't, start shouting out to the class why I'm doing this, but some students are like listening, and they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. So it plants a seed for the others. And then in the next level class, which I call intermediate 1, then they learn the menstrual program, or I just include them. It just depends. And lately, because I do just include people, I do from time to time for my students here, pre-pandemic, I'll have a menstrual course, men invited, and they learn the whole program, which actually can take 3 hours. You don't have to do the whole program. If you have a limited time, you can select, but I teach everything and they're shocked how hard it is, but then they have a tool and they also want to do it again because it's such a hard program. They need to learn it again. It's not such a hard program. It's just forward bend, supine poses. And there's beginning poses, Adho Mukha Svanasana, Uttanasana, all these supported. And the Ardha Chandrasana, you can just do it with your back to the wall. At home, if you have your kitchen sink, your arm can hold that sink, the leg up on the countertop. Uttita Parshvahasta Padangustasana, Prasarita Padottanasana, Supta Padangustasana, then the forward bends. And you can mix those up. Sometimes you can put the supine poses first and the forward bend second. It depends, what you need. But it's not that easy a program. So I think that resistance is over now, and that's why we're more inclusive in the class. Unless somebody, I ask people even now online teaching, they can send me a chat so they don't have to say, unmute and say, I have my period, everyone. And I could just say, those who have their periods, do this instead of what we're doing classically. But I always ask them, let me know if it's a normal, healthy period. Because the heavy bleeding will, if you do things wrong, you can bleed more, and that's not good at all. And people have scanty flow is not a normal thing. And so for scanty flow, there's other practices which, are all shown in my book. So, that's a really interesting, good question about, how accepting, especially foreigners in India and even our classes here, because we're told we should be able to do anything. And we can, if we practice for what we need, we'll have more energy, less problems.
One of the things, Lois, that I really enjoyed about studying with you was this inclusion into these common ailments classes, into these therapy classes, and particularly the women's classes. I think that I got an invaluable education from you in that. And I mean, I've been to several of the menses programs and several of the pregnancy programs, to the point where when you say in class that I should move my ovaries, I feel my I feel my phantom ovaries moving as well. So so what's been good
And a
about
lot
that?
of things apply for the prostate problems and the testicular problems that men get, that they're not so ready to reveal. I'll just interrupt your question for a moment, because I had a student who I didn't know had an undescended testicle that would send him to the hospital. And it took him 2 years to work up courage to tell me about it. And then when I admitted him to my therapy class, I had to promise him that the other assistants weren't going to know his problem. So I would just say he has a groin pull. You know, so the things that I learned from Gita applied to men too. And one time I was traveling, I was in Northwest Argentina in the middle of nowhere with a friend who lived there. And he had another friend. He said, you got to come and help him. He just checked out of the hospital. And every time he's going into the hospital, he gets these testicular infections that would send him into the hospital. And then he'd come home and he'd still be infected. And it was just a chronic problem. Please, can you help him? I'm like, okay. But I never worked with somebody with a testicular infection. And I was like scratching my head, you know, trying to think what to do. And I just was thinking, well, that heavy bleeding practice would relate to the testicular infection, but I wasn't sure, but we did it. And he was better just in that one practice session. And then I was still confused. And when I was back in India, I just told Gita this story. And I said, I did the heavy bleeding program. Was that right? And she said, yes, that was exactly right. So a lot of the things that students learn, the women students particularly, for their own periods and the complications, the abnormal periods, and what's in my book is also good for men. And certainly my cancer book shows how to help with the prostate. But in terms of the women's class that you've taken, one of my teachers, one of my male teachers, he helped every week in my women's class. And when a pregnant student would come in, he knew exactly what to do, you know. And so the men can learn this too, because a lot of men, you know, don't take these courses because they figure, oh, you know, what would they know? But you can learn a lot. I mean, what would I know about prostate enlargement or testicular infection? What would Gita Ji or what would Guruji know about menses and pregnancy? What would Gita know about pregnancy? But they knew, you know, they knew. And they even knew how to work with people who would have abortions, actually, what to do after that, or what to do for a woman who was sexually assaulted. And, you know, how would they know? Because they weren't sexually assaulted, but you come to know how the body is traumatized and how to target these areas and how to contain them from the trauma, to align and balance and heal. And in that alignment and balance and healing, then you can open that space up again without fear, you know, because you can't just spread the legs open. I had a student, this is very early, that was in the late 80s. It was a long time ago. And I didn't even know that much then. I didn't spend my 2 years in Pune really working with Gita on my problems, which I wasn't going there for that, but I had to reveal them. So I didn't know much in the late 80s, but there was a woman and her husband in my yoga class. They were newly married. It was at the university. And they both came up to me after class because they could not consummate their marriage, as they put it. So they could not have intercourse. And also her doctor wasn't able to conduct a gynecological exam because this woman was sexually assaulted by her family, her father, her uncle, her brothers. Can you imagine? No, such trauma. And I even recognized it before they told me the story, because we were doing Supta Padangustasana and there's this adjustment, and I was coming in with my hand close to her leg, the top thigh. And then I knew to pull back. I could feel it. You know, as a teacher, anybody who works with bodies becomes very sensitive and intuitive. This woman was putting up a force field and I need to back off. And then they revealed to me after class, you know, she had to, they were Indian actually, and she was forced into a marriage. Her story is horrific. And this forced marriage, basically her husband would rape her. So she fled. She fled to the States. They were graduate students here, and she met this nice man who was very patient with her, loving, but they couldn't consummate, nor could she get this gynec exam. And her gynecologist was a good friend of mine, so she gave us permission to talk to each other about it. And I worked with her through yoga. And through yoga, she practiced. You can use yoga to overcome trauma, including assault. You know, there's ways to, like I said, you contain to make space, to heal trauma, even trauma from surgery. That's a trauma. And then you can start to open in a relaxed manner. You can't just open your legs when you've been traumatized. So her doctor called me, and actually they told me too. The doctor called me, she did a successful pelvic exam, and they consummated their marriage through the work of yoga. Isn't that an amazing, beautiful story? How it can heal.
It most definitely is, Lois. And there is another point that I want us to get back to about men in these women's courses. But since you brought up the topic of trauma, there's something going on within yoga, not necessarily Iyengar yoga, but yoga in general, having to do with trauma-informed yoga. And
trauma-informed yoga?
Trauma-informed yoga. And that being a particular approach to teaching, and that also being a particular approach to holding space for people who have actually gone through trauma. And I have been in spaces when I've traveled and taught where this trauma-informed approach to yoga was practiced, but oftentimes what I've found is that it was in terms of how we speak, and in terms of how loudly we speak, and in terms of not necessarily having an energy in the class and maybe triggering for a person's trauma. But what I hear you talking about when you speak about this trauma-informed approach that we have within Iyengar yoga, it's not necessarily a matter of how we speak or the modifications that we give. It's this deeper intelligence, or this other type of intelligence, that we seem to be working from. Can you talk a bit more about that from your perspective?
From my perspective, I don't know what woman gets through life without being abused in some way. Okay, I've had my own trauma, so maybe people who are traumatized, can develop a sensitivity to that. But on the other hand, aside from that, I was, I was always, I guess, sensitive to when I was teaching. I think everybody goes through this to a certain point, especially let's take Urdhva Dhanurasana. Somebody turns their toes out and you go, oh, because you're feeling it in your body. You're feeling it in your body. As a teacher, I put myself into my students' bodies. I joke, I say, I can practice transmigration. And so you can feel their bodies. Say it's just somebody who's standing like, so sunk. I can feel that in my own body that, I start standing up straighter myself, hoping maybe that'll stand up straighter, set an example. But it pains our bodies, our own bodies. We take it on. We take it on. I even, when I adjust people in my hands, I have to wash my hands because that energy, I'm absorbing, I'm taking out that negative energy from them and giving my positive energy. I mean, it sounds a little bit like hocus pocus, but I truly do feel this. And so the example of the woman who had been assaulted her whole life, when I would come close to her, I'm like, okay, back off. And so I was always aware, in our adjusting, especially that can invite problems. But I always, and I train my teachers this way, I would say, look, the only thing you adjust, first, you don't adjust at all. They don't need adjusting, Then if you're going to start adjusting when they're more used to this, or, a lot of students want to be adjusted, it feels great to be adjusted. You start with the feet and the hands, because that's the periphery, that's the least threatening. If somebody's hands are turned in and, of course, we have the sequence that we follow, or you give the instruction, you repeat it if they're not following it, you try to say it with different words, maybe they'll catch it differently, and then it's not working. Then you go in for the adjustments, saying it with, turn the hand out, if it failed verbally, trying different ways. And then the feet. And then, you slowly work your way up. Okay. Now, I never touch an abdomen without somebody's permission. And sometimes I do want to touch somebody's abdomen to see how hard it is, but we've already developed a relationship, a rapport, and I'm only, taking 2 fingers. And I really dislike this adjustment that misinformed people do when somebody's in Shirshasana. It's very typical that the bottom ribs go forward and the buttocks goes back, and they'll put the hand on the abdomen to adjust it. And I'm like, no, that's not how to adjust it. In fact, I'll tell them, because whenever I'm behind them, I'm saying, I'm behind you. I'm going to put my hand on your back by your bottom ribs. Now push back to my hand, push your bottom ribs back. That's a better way to do it. And it's less threatening.
Yeah.
But to work from the periphery inwards, adjusting, you get the student used to you. You also learn, I often teach, because there can be creepy touching. First of all, if somebody has clammy hands, as a teacher, I notice that. I'm like, something has to happen with that, because that clamminess feels really creepy, basically. Don't adjust, because it's not going to feel good. But if you're okay, then there's a way where you just connect with the skin. See, some people just grab and move, and that doesn't feel good, and it actually pulls the skin. So you have that skin, then you take the skin to the muscle and then to the bone, and you're connecting it and then moving. So there's a way to touch, a hierarchy. Now you get to Adho Mukha Svanasana, and one of the best adjustments is pulling that top thigh back. But, and I will show them maybe on another student, this is how I'm going to adjust you, be aware. And I already know people I shouldn't touch at all. But I start from the bottom of the thigh, pulling them back. I'm not going to take my hands right to the top of the thigh, pulling them back. So I always did that. I always was aware of how I'm insinuating myself in a student's space, and not to violate their space. I was always aware of that, always. And I always taught it to my teachers. We would work on adjusting all those points. And now it's much more informed. And if you're not sure about adjusting somebody, don't touch them, period. Just use your voice.
Regarding that use of the voice, Lois, something that has been in the air, in the community, and even outside of the community for a while, has been this notion that in terms of this trauma-informed approach to yoga or holding space, that Iyengar yoga may not necessarily be the softest container for a person to enter. And this is something I briefly was speaking about with Patricia Walden yesterday, and it's something that I'd love to hear your opinion about, because I love the Iyengar method. We love the Iyengar method, and we're here and we stay here because of all of the magical, wonderful things and the deep, powerful transformation that Iyengar yoga forces all of us to face within ourselves. And oftentimes that isn't necessarily being held in a soft and gentle way. And oftentimes that isn't necessarily having a warm cloud to lean into. Sometimes it is feeling as if you're in the middle of the valley of the shadow and you're facing your own shadow in that process. And I think that when we practice Iyengar yoga for a long time, we have that sensitivity to know that even if this feels difficult, or even if this feels challenging, or even if someone is shouting at me, the larger container of that is love. and I love that. I love that deeply, and that's a part of my upbringing, sort of, as being a Black person from the Caribbean, but that's also a part of my dance training. I knew that even if I was being shouted at, even if I was being pushed into or pushed on psychologically, it was, how are you showing up within the world? And are you really showing up in a way that allows you to move beyond some of your own suffering in order to be here in a functional way, in order to be here fully present? So that's how and I wouldn't even say dealt, because it was never a thing for me to deal with, but that's how I've rationalized who we are and how we are within the context of Iyengar yoga. But I know that there's a lot of people who don't feel that way. I know that there's a lot of people who feel as if Iyengar yoga may not necessarily be the most trauma-informed space for a person to feel softly supported. What do you have to say to that after your many years of being an Iyengar yoga practitioner?
Well, the first thing is Iyengar yoga is not for everyone. Period. Because we are demanding and commanding. I mean, yoga is about transformation. Yoga is about liberation, kaivalya. Yoga is about being silent and present. And in that presence, you become stress-free. So, not that stress isn't there, but when you're present, you're not going to be, you're going to be more likely to be in that parasympathetic relaxation response. So, you know, in Iyengar yoga and in Guruji's brilliant lifetime of its study, the study of yoga, his practice, his brilliance, his genius, the body is in a tamasic state. So those who don't know what that is, it's so we have our nature. The prakriti is our nature, and the prusha is our soul. And part of that prakriti is the gunas. And the gunas, there's three. There's the sattvic state, which has to do with illumination, and that should be from the head up. And then there's a rajasic state related to the body. It's the chest. You know, your organs have to be fiery, that your heart has to pump, your lungs have to breathe, everything has to be, you know, warm. And then you have the tamasic guna, where that's related more to the earth element. So you're grounded in your legs. You know, people don't even stand on their legs properly. And so the spinal column collapses. Your arms are also part of that. Most people are in a tamasic, overwhelming tamasic state. And so in Iyengar yoga, we teach in the rajasic state to bring these students out from their depths of inertia. And I don't think this is peculiar to Iyengar yoga. You studied ballet. I'm sure your ballet teachers were yelling and shouting and screaming at you. I am sure your ballet teachers did not say, "Now, Mychal, you must lift your leg much higher." Please.
Well, they probably would have said it if they were practicing trauma-informed ballet.
And also the ballet teacher is also molding you, you know, right? To get, okay, it's like, wow, I'm there, you know? And I personally responded to strong teachers, even though I grew up with trauma. I'll never forget my 5th grade teacher. She was so strict. She was my favorite teacher. Now, I'll also never forget my 3rd grade teacher, who was mean. She wasn't strict. She was just mean. And I was always out in the hallway serving time. But I responded to that strict disciplinarian teacher. But that strict disciplinarian teacher is going to give you the pathway to freedom. It's the pathway to freedom. I do not respond to the phone sex voice, as I call it. And even my teachers, when I would observe them teaching and they get to Shavasana and they'd be like, now, let go yourself. Let the arms and legs release. Feel soft. And first of all, if I have somebody teaching in a very soft voice, I'm not going to be in Shavasana because I'm going to be straining to hear. What are they saying? I can't hear them. Speak up. You know, in Iyengar yoga, we say, relax. I'm like, okay, I'm relaxed. So, and for me personally, I have a loud voice. It's hard for me. I can control it. I can use my quiet indoor voice, but, you know, the students respond. The students respond. They get the fire here instead of here. Most people put the fire in their brains, thinking in the future, worrying about the past, you know, which builds that flight or fight response, actually. And I just heard the other day that 50% of the time, this research showed that people are thinking this way. So at least for 2 hours a day in a yoga class or your practice, you are going to be present and you're strict with yourself because you can hear that teacher's voice. I don't think I have Guruji's voice and Gita's voice in my practice every day of my life, every day. And they probably would not be there if they taught with a very low, soft voice. It doesn't connect. You need that Rajasic teaching to bring the student up, to balance their gunas, to balance their natures. So, so it's not for everybody. It's just not for everybody. As much as we would love it to be for everybody, it's not. And people, you know, don't want to necessarily think. They just want to be lying down and hanging out. That's okay, good. You know, if you connect with the teacher with the quiet voice, good. If you connect with the teacher with the very strong, dynamic voice, good. You know, it's not 100% that, you know, I'm teaching with that loud, dynamic voice. It has its moments, you know. I think I've answered that. Do you think I've answered that?
I think you've answered that, Lois. And once again, this is something that I personally love about this practice, because when I came to Iyengar yoga, I felt this demand, this demand and this command over myself to step forward and be the highest version of myself in that moment. And I love how that awareness, it translates into the larger sphere of my life, even when I'm not practicing, and at all moments, no matter what I'm doing, I'm always thinking, am I really doing this from the highest version of who I am? I remember a couple of years ago.
Well, that's yamas and niyamas, how you behave with the world, how you behave with yourself, which we make a part of the study of yoga. Yes.
Definitely. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was going through what felt like the most tragic breakup ever. And you were there, and you were there, and you witnessed it. And one day, I think you and I were having lunch, and you said to me, Mychal, something's different in you. Like, what's going on? You seem so different. And I said, well, Lois, the last time I came here, I had a boyfriend and I had a partner, and now I don't. And you were like, Mychal, like, get over it. It's time. It's time for you to.
Did I say that?
I will never forget what you said. You said, Mychal, it's about time for you to get over it, because holding on to things is not the yogic way. And that just completely switched something in my brain, and it showed me once again how much, and the reasons why I love the system so much, because it was like, yes, you had your moments, yes, you laid yourself down to cry a while, but now it's time for you to rise and fight again. And I love that, how that's built within Iyengar yoga. And I have heard,
and you even when somebody is having deep levels of grief, we will put them in chest opening positions, because it's got to come out. Cry, get it out, let it out. You can't hold it in. So, we open here, and I've had people even standing in Tadasana, opening their chest for the first time in their life, just standing upright, crying. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. This is what I need. Or some people are like, oh no, this is too much, and so you learn to back off if it's too much. But if the student's ready, mostly the student is ready, and they're ready to cry and let it out. Let it out. Yeah, but go on.
no, I just find it so interesting, because I'm well aware that within other traditions of yoga, and not even traditions, but like just other ways, other ways in which yoga is taught, especially now, there's this massive space being held for the trauma informed approach to teaching. And I'm as I hear you speak, and as I also hear my own internal dialogue around this, I am witnessing that we're all so very different, because within that sort of environment, the trauma informed approach to teaching is something completely different, because there's actually this deep acknowledgement of the trauma that that person has gone through. Whereas in Iyengar yoga, it's like, no, you are you. You are you in this moment. You aren't your story. You aren't anything that's happened to you. You aren't anywhere that you've been, or anyone who you've been associated with. You are only you within this moment. And whatever trauma that you have is also not you. You are here as an individual. And if you choose to show up here to practice today, then you will receive the same practice that everybody else receives, because you are you, and you are in this present moment, and dwelling in the present moment. This is the only moment. And it's like night and day. And so it's something I've really been thinking about a lot, just because I know that there's been a call, and I've heard that call, and I've heard people mention it to me as well, and say, what about a trauma informed approach? And I know that within me, that doesn't sit within my heart as being the right way for me to show up within the world, because one, I'm not that type of person, but two, I'm really focused on where are we right now, and what can we accomplish right now together, regardless of, I have a story. Last year, 2020 was the story of so many people. But when I showed up to yoga, it was, I am not that story. I am not those things that are happening in the world. I am only me. And what can I do from this perspective of me being who I am in this present moment?
Well, and that's the bottom line of yoga. We are not our depression. We are not our anxiety. We are not our trauma. And yoga helps you to still the fluctuations of the mind. Then you come to your own true form. The now begins a study of yoga. Yoga stills the fluctuations of the consciousness. Then you come to your own true form. Otherwise, you're not. So, for example, back bends are used for depression. There's, Guruji once said, there's no way you can be a depressed person in a back bend. So it brings you to your own true form. Same thing you do forward bends for mania. You can't be manic in a forward bend because it's so quieting to the central nervous system. Now, everybody is different. And I think because I worked in the field of psychology and social work in my very early developmental years of my 20s, when I was working in an institution for emotionally disturbed children, I also worked for the state investigating child abuse and neglect. I worked with people who were really traumatized, not just by families, but by poverty, everything. And I think that those formative years helped to develop me to be sensitive to people with not just trauma, but mental health issues. And so I will treat people differently who are very fragile in that sense. You know, I will have a different approach. And Guruji did that too. Guruji could recognize people who were fragile and wouldn't be, pushing them to their limit. Give them space, give them time. So each and every student is considered, and even though it's a group class, within that group class, you can personalize it, So if somebody's very fragile, I'm not going to be standing right next to them and saying instructions from them, I'll give them space. So this is something that everyone can develop. I don't know. I have to say I haven't done any trauma-informed training. I have done the other, the social justice programs and, sexual misconduct. I'm aware of that. But regardless, I think we do have to develop as teachers this sensitivity. And some of us are more intuitive and sensitive than other teachers. That's just human nature. And I think you're probably sensitive, Mychal, very much to it. And so you could recognize who needs that more rajasic push and who you have to back off from as a teacher. And certainly when I'm teaching, to bring it back to the menstrual cycle, when I'm teaching the menstrual practice, I'm not going to be teaching rajasically to those students. Bend the right knee, left leg straight, hold your foot, go forward, support your head, stay quiet, in a nutshell. I'm not going to insist because that's not the time to insist. Or when I'm having my therapy class, everybody's definitely doing their personalized practice. And some people need to be pushed, The most interesting experience I had was with a student who was brought in. He was that was the first and last student I ever saw with catatonia. Maybe it's called something now, but they couldn't even speak. It's a deep psychological state where you're frozen. And somebody brought him in, and I knew I had to get him upside down. I knew I had to get him on his hands in handstand. I just knew that's what he had to do. I can't remember what I did before, but it was building up to this point. And I stood with my back to the wall to help him get up. I had two other assistants to help him get up. He was a very tall, skinny guy who was standing absolutely like this. And I said, you're going to hands down and your legs up. Let's go. And he just did this. And so then I knew, hold your ears, hands down now, legs up, go. And he did it. And, we held him, we supported him. I could feel when it was time to come down, and he came down. He was a new person. He's like, can I do that again? He spoke for the first time, wanting to do it again. Now that's an extreme case, okay? Versus somebody with mania. I'm not going to be shouting at them. They're already shouting inside. So you have to, treat that different. So those are extreme cases, but everybody else is in the middle. So in a way, your teaching is nuanced for each and every student. You know, yes, the Rajoguna for everyone, because everybody comes with a tamasic body, even though you think you might not have a tamasic body. The first time I was on that floor in Guruji, I listened to Patricia's beautiful interview, and yes, it's true. You stand in the back of the room when you're tall. She's 5'11", I'm 5'1". And I stood in the back of the room to hide. When Guruji said, find your places, get on your line, you know, there weren't that many people, so we just used these lines. And I'm in the back. I felt a lightning bolt on my arm. I didn't even know he was there. I felt a lightning bolt on my arm to put me front row dead center. I thought he was punishing me for hiding, but it was because I was short. I didn't know. And the first pose, we jump our legs apart, and I'm looking up saying, wow, I'm here, I'm here. It's not just a man in the book anymore. I'm really here. I can't believe this. This is so amazing. All of a sudden, and this is my brain, right? And he stops dead teaching what he's teaching. And he shouts. Oh man, did he have a booming voice back in the day. And he shouts, you! You are looking up at the ceiling instead of down into your soul. Took me 10 years to raise my head after that. I swear, 10 years later, he was teaching me in practice Virabhadrasana 1, and he kept hitting me in my chin. Lift your chin up, lift your head up. It got stuck. I got stuck looking down into my soul. And boy, did he pick on me that whole intensive, like, what's this beginner doing here? You know, because I thought I was already Rajasic, right? You know, but I wasn't. I was still Tamasic. He's like, what are you doing? You're not even lifting your kneecaps. You know? So even if you're strong and vibrant, don't think you're not having that tamoguna covering your body. You know, with the Rajoguna head. It's still Rajoguna, but it's down into the soul. You know, later you get that vibrational quality of the Sattva guna. Ultimately, all the gunas disappear when you reach Kaivalya, but we're long lifetimes away from that, but we strive.
You started telling me that story once. I think we were in Brazil, in Florianopolis, and I asked you about your first time in India, and you started telling that story, and you were like, "No, I'm not going to talk about it anymore." And so I'm really happy to hear the other end of that. I feel like my circle is complete.
Very good.
Now, Lois, coming back to this point about just teachers knowing how to accommodate women when they're on their period in their classes, one of the things that really stands out about your teaching is that you make sure that all of us, even from intro 1-2, we know how to take that entire intro 1-2 syllabus, which is huge, and adapt.
74 poses, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And
adapt, the pranayamas. Yeah.
Exactly. And adapt every single one of those poses for knees, low back, neck, and shoulder, but also for menses. So
and pregnancy.
And most definitely pregnancy. And so when I came back home to Nassau, after studying with you and after continuing to come back and study with you, I just found that the universe just dropped all of these women who had endometriosis in my life.
I remember you telling me that.
All of these,
like a magnet.
Exactly. All of these women who had endometriosis dropped into my life. And then women were coming to me because their period exceeded 10 days and they wanted it to dry up. And then women were coming to me because their period wouldn't start and they wanted it to start. And then women were coming to me because they wanted their husbands to come because their husband had Crohn's disease. And I took the husband with Crohn's disease through the heavy bleeding program. And that is something he got so much relief from. So I just got all of these cases and all of these examples to use the knowledge that I was getting from you. And at the same time, I realized that I have colleagues who have studied Iyengar yoga for years and years who haven't gotten this training and they haven't had this experience of taking all of their intro 1 and 2 poses and then their junior 1 poses and adapting them for all of the common ailments for pregnancy and for menstruation. particularly the men, particularly some of my male colleagues, really haven't had this training at all. And so I want to know from you, how important is it, you think, for men coming into Iyengar Yoga, or for male Iyengar Yoga teachers, to have this sort of knowledge about how to accommodate women throughout all of the stages of their menstrual cycle as well as beyond?
There should be no division about male teachers, female teachers. They all need to learn this because the majority of students who come to your class, first of all, are female in this culture. In India, it used to be opposite, but you know, it was mostly men doing yoga. But in our culture, it's mostly women coming to class. And you have to know. And I find it interesting. I think I get a lot of men in my class. Isn't that interesting? Even though I do, you know, take care of, you know, people with all these problems you mentioned and the menses. But men have problems too. And I think one of the problems in general is that they, like that man that I gave you an example of, they're not willing so much to reveal what problems they have. This is, you know, probably too much of a generalized statement, but perhaps the yoga can make them sensitive to being accepting of, let me share what my problems are, you know, with my teacher so they can help me. And there should be no division of, you know, only women need to learn these things. And like I said, when I had, you know, just for my local students, not teachers, but students, take a 2-part menstrual course, because it takes like so many, it's a 3-hour practice to learn everything. So I had 2-hour sessions to be able to cover it all. And it has relevance to not just menses, like this is also good for X, Y, and Z. So I had men in the class. They learn the menstrual sequence and they're going to benefit from it. But men should learn what to do for menses, what to do for pregnancy, endometriosis, fibroids, polycystic ovarian syndrome. These are such typical problems, you know, and if you know how to treat them, a lot of times you might see that woman disappear, you know, because they don't know that when they're in the throes of feeling so horrific from their endometriosis, the pain from it, they don't come to class. But then they'll see, oh, wow, they're helping somebody with endometriosis. Wow. You know, and it could be a man teacher. The men should know this. Absolutely. Yeah. And yes, I do require my teachers, my apprentices, to fill out these charts. Knees, low back, neck and shoulders, menses, pregnancy, make the list of all the poses. And it's not to be therapeutics. It's just how to include them in the class. Tadasana, feet apart, menses. Trikonasana, the hand on the block could be enough, or face the wall. You know, so the top hand, so when you're facing the wall, everything could be softer. I could show that, and people can even try it because it feels really good. You don't need the trestle. So you just face the wall, and it's much quieter on the abdomen. And not only that, it has a mental effect on the brain, because when you're looking at a wall that close, you stay quiet. I often teach Shirshasana, Urdhva Dandasana, and then legs up, because they're facing the wall. So they have no time to think about falling. They are only going to think of pressing their forearms, lifting the upper arms, because when you're in the middle of the room looking out, your mind wanders more for beginners when they're going to invert. So that closeness to the wall helps to remove that heaviness of the brain and be present.
One of the things that you said once, I can't remember where we were traveling, but someone asked you a question about them reaching out to you and asking for help. And something you said in response, I'll never forget. You said, you know, if when I say to you, do cross bolsters and then do Pavanamuktasan and then do this on a wide Setubandha pension, if when I say these things to you, you don't know what any of those things mean, then you really shouldn't be asking me for help. You should be speaking to your local Iyengar yoga teachers, and you should be learning Iyengar yoga in such a way whereas you get that practice from them, you get that training from them, and don't think that, you come directly to me, because you need to have a foundational understanding of Iyengar yoga practice first before you even reach out to me and ask me for help, because I'm going to speak to you from the assumption that you already deeply know this practice. And that, you've said several things that have given me goosebumps over the years, but that one really stood out because you were essentially saying, and this is my own paraphrase, that students need to learn where they are first with the teachers who they have at their disposal, because maybe they're not qualified to reach out to you and ask you for the sort of help that you can give, because the point that you'll start from is going to be a different point than where they're actually prepared to learn. How do you feel about that now, today, or when I say that back to you, does that feel like something that you still feel is true?
Oh, absolutely. And it's very relevant today when we're teaching yoga online. I guess I'm even exposing myself here on your podcast, that, let me go to her for this problem. And if they do, contact me, I will send it right back. First find an Iyengar teacher that you can work with, because I can't write the book for you. That's not my job anymore. I'm long in the tooth now. I've been around the block. I've done the grunt work, I still teach raw beginners. But that's I can't bring somebody up, like you said. You described it beautifully. And it's even more relevant today because, like I just said, I'm more exposed because we're all online. And even some of my teachers are asking about their students, and which is the opposite end, because I'm actually getting surprised and disappointed by how many my teachers know things. My teachers know, but teachers, even high levels, don't know anything because they never have been interested. It's like, but this is part of yoga. You need to, it's not like there's a separate department of Iyengar yoga. It's all one, it's all part of it. And even people with problems, ultimately, you try to get them to do a regular class as much as possible. So if I have teachers writing me about their students, first of all, sometimes I know these people, and lately, I've been throwing it right back at them because I know they've attended my courses. I know they've attended, my common ailments courses or my therapy courses, and they're still asking me what to do, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, they don't even send me enough information that I can even answer the question. It's like, I need the age. If they're a new student, I'm not going to answer because they need to be a regular student. Let's not waste our time here. Because they'll say, I had a new student come with this problem, what to do? It's like, wait till they come back. Wait till they come back again and again. Then I'll help you what to do with them. But now I'm also saying, you've got this. Trust yourself. Iyengar yoga is experimental, not even the therapy. All of it's experimental. This is what Guruji was teaching us all along. In Trikonasana, what happens if I turn my right foot out more? What happens if I turn my right foot in? Where am I feeling this? And he would teach us like this. And then he would end it with, why don't you think like that? He was trying so hard to get us to think like that. But we want to rely on the teacher to feed us everything. They're not going to be around forever. It breaks my heart. Guruji, Gitaji are gone. I hear them in my head every day. And so I'm throwing the question back on people. you've got, I'm not just throwing it, I'm saying you've got this. You can do it. Basically, because I think the teachers have doubts too. They have doubts. They're not sure. But that's what Iyengar yoga trains you to do. Like, if this isn't working, can I modify it? What is the targeted area I need to target? How do I enhance circulation there? How do I create space there? How do I rest that area if it needs to rest? And if it's not working, you know how to observe the student when it's not working. You look at their eyes, even the corners that Guruji said, look at their corners. They clench. I had, students telling me, I'm fine. And their eyes were bulging out, glassy. They're not fine. Look at the pallor of the skin. Look at their whole over, step back. I always, this, step back, see the big picture. You can see a relaxation response in people, or you can see they're still tense in a pose. Get the big picture. And if the relaxation responses come, if there's an internal alignment, Guruji would look at internal alignment. Even if the head was crooked, if the internal alignment was there, he'd leave them alone. A teacher would come along and straighten it, and he would shout, why'd you disturb that thing inside? So you have to look and observe the student, and that should teach you. Do you adapt the pose? Do you stop the pose? Do you try another pose? It's all experimental, even in our practice. What happens in Urdhva Dhanurasana? When I press my big toes down, where am I feeling that? What happens if I lift the outer foot? In fact, I often have told this story. Many times you would see Guruji teaching Abhijata Urdhva Dhanurasana, and we would be appalled. Her knees were out, her elbows were bent. It was a terrible pose. And he wasn't telling her any of the things that we would tell her. Knees in, toes in, heels out, lock your elbows, lift the back leg, lift, all this stuff. There's my Rajasaka, with for back bends. He would say, observe the skin of your outer shin from here to here. Observe on the right, observe it on the left, from here to here. Which is longer? Which is shorter? And he'd get her to be sensitive to that and say, oh, well, the right side's longer. Well, why didn't you make the left side longer? And then the shape would come from that level. But we can't teach like that. We can't ask the students to observe an inch of skin on one shin and the other, which is longer, which is shorter. That was Guruji teaching Abhijata. And he would teach us like that too, as well, of course. But we were long-term seasoned practitioners that he could teach like that. So I think we have to be confident, and not just confident, those levels of practice, Mirdu, Madhya, Dimatra, mild, middling, intense. And then there's a Samveganam, the supremely vigorous, intense practitioner. That's Guruji. But can we reach that level looking at ourselves and looking at the students and being supremely confident in your teaching? And you can be supremely confident in your teaching because you can cancel a program if it's not right. You can change course if it's not right. Maybe you're going to teach a certain way. You walk in, you get a sense in the room. It's like, oh, well, there goes that program. These students need this. They don't need that. I'm sure a lot of teachers have experienced this. And it's the same way when you're helping students that you're not sure how to help. I'll give an example. Maybe I've told you this. It was my first trip ever to Russia. It was many, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago almost. And I taught in Moscow, and I was treated a trip to St. Petersburg, but I wasn't teaching there, just to tour. But it was so sweet. The students came to greet me at the train with flowers. I love the Russians. And then I got a request. There was a woman who is a teacher. She's in the hospital. She just had a brain aneurysm. She wants you to teach her. I'm like, no way. I've never worked with somebody who had a brain aneurysm. Let the doctors treat her. I don't know what to do.
Is this the woman who came to your room?
Yes. So I'm in my room. There's a knock on the door. She checked herself out of the hospital. I opened the door and she's white as a sheet. No blood was circulating. And what could I do? She threw herself at me basically. So I had to help her. And I'm a sucker for helping people. So I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking inside, I'm freaking out, but I'm not going to show that outside. Okay, come in. And I knew enough, like, first of all, I had to check the abdomen. First, I had to ask her a lot of questions. And I discovered that the aneurysm was a congenital problem that just happened to blow, She had some differently wired blood vessels that weren't normal. And she had headaches for years and a hard abdomen for years that she noticed that the doctors didn't pay attention to. She went from doctor to doctor. Something was wrong. And so I worked with softening her abdomen first. I'm not going to give you, a list of poses because everybody's different. This is the problem. People start writing things down and it's like everybody's different, even if they have the same problem. Somebody else with an aneurysm, I would treat different. Maybe they had a soft abdomen. I could go straight away to something else, but I had to get this woman's abdomen soft. And I figured I had to bring color back into her. She was so ill. So I thought of the neck and shoulders and how to bring circulation there, Parshva very gentle, Baddha Vijasana, and the color started coming back and we started doing more and more. And I took pictures of her front, side, and back in Tadasana, relaxed standing, actually, not Tadasana. And I took photos of the poses because I was like freaking out inside. This woman could die on me. This is not my place, but there she was. I had to help her. So I sent the photos to Guruji just because, and I rarely actually contacted him about any student. That was one. There was one other, and that was it. And myself. But so she I did all these poses and Guruji basically validated it. He said, yes, this is correct what you did. You could have added this, and she got well. I did see her again, and then she came to Pune. When I saw her again, she wanted the next year, she wanted to have her inversions back, and I helped her, and I was more confident too. And she had gone to Pune. She's very well right now. But here's the thing. Even I needed that validation from my teacher. Did I do the right thing in this extreme case? So I think a lot of teachers are actually looking for that validation. Okay. And so basically I'm asking teachers to not freak out, to present yourself extremely confident. So the student isn't, if you're going to, back off physically even, they'll see this and they'll lose faith. So, okay, come in, do the detective work. Is the abdomen hard? Work on that. Is the breath okay? These are important things. Know where the circulation needs to come. It needs to come up here. And you've got this because you've studied Iyengar yoga for so long. You've learned so many things. And the validation is that the color comes back. They feel better. So teachers out there, you've got this.
One of the gems that I've gotten from you, Lois, in coming to your therapy courses, whether in America or in Brazil or wherever it's been, has
and
been
asana courses. I don't just do. I'm not a specialist. I'm a generalist. We should all be generalists.
That as well. So that's one of the other things that we should be able to do all of the things. But one of the things that you say constantly is that we shouldn't be having this mentality that, oh, she used 2 bolsters, 3 bricks, a slanting plank, a sticky piece, a tiny plate weight, another sticky piece, or whatever. but we should take a look at or think about what the iconic image of the pose is, and then think about how we can shapeshift that iconic image of the pose to suit the needs of that person's condition. And
Oh, Mychal, I'm so happy to hear you say this. You've really learned.
it's something that I live with in my heart every day, and it's something that I also teach from every day, because the point that you were making was that we go to workshops and we get so caught up on the fact that there were 4 blankets and not 5. But suppose somebody but suppose somebody in doing that prone shavasana is needing a 5th blanket. Suppose they're needing the foam roller beneath their breast because they're large chested. Suppose they're needing another blanket under the abdomen. And I think that the way how you've taught this content is just really, really, truly superb, because you've taught your students to be shapeshifters, and you've
Those are
taught
your words.
but you've also taught us not to hold on to this idealized version of what we should be doing with these props, because the book said that, but you've taught us how to see what a person needs based on the conditions of their body. And this for me has truly been miraculous, because as I look around at people who have the books, they have the books that you've written or whatnot, but they don't have that mentality. So they purchase your knee book, which is a superb book, but they don't have that mentality to see what else might be needed. They purchase the lower back book, which is another superb book. I know that you don't plan to do it again. You don't want to do a remake of the lower back book, but it's a good book. And still, there's so much more that you've taught us about dealing with the lower back that isn't in that book. But they don't have this eye, and they don't have this mentality about how can I put my body in this person's body to shapeshift this experience for them, and to then support them from my internal experience of what they need. And so what I want to know from you as a person who's written books, and this is my last question as well, what I want to know from you as a person who's written books, you have these books in public circulation, and anyone can buy these books, whether they're certified Iyengar yoga teachers or non-certified Iyengar yoga teachers. I've come across many people who have your books. How do you feel knowing that the books that you've written are so publicly accessible to everyone, even if they haven't been trained with this deeper understanding of shape shifting to accommodate the student, as opposed to just replicating exactly what they see in the book?
Well, that's a really good question, and it also just relates to people who study with an Iyengar yoga teacher and then go back to their other school of yoga. They'll never fully understand it. So the bottom line for shape shifting is, the first and foremost thing is you have to learn the classical Iyengar yoga for yourself. You have to have that depth there first before you can start delving into adaptations. Yes, my books are out there, but they're not really out there because, well, first of all, I'm anti-Amazon. I abhor them. Maybe when they start, paying their billions in taxes and paying their people. And, because they shut down all the mom and pop stores. But anyway, I don't sell my books. I actually went to a publishing company, but they didn't, it was my woman's book. They didn't want the book because it doesn't appeal to the larger audience. It's specifically really for Iyengar yoga practitioners. And I did actually, I have to retract what I said. I did actually have to sell my woman's book on Amazon only because I had mortgaged my house to print that book because I wanted the book to be substantial. I didn't want to just print it in China on the cheap paper where the pictures bleed through. And the photos, there's over 800 photos. And I wanted that photo to be clear without any bleeding. So it was very expensive to print. I had to mortgage my house. And then I had an assistant who made a mistake saying I needed to print another set of books when I didn't need to. So I had all these excessive amounts of women's books that cost me, you don't want to know, that was going to break me. And so somebody said, well, just put it on Amazon and, you know, sell it through them. Well, I'm not doing it anymore, but I didn't look at that page, but my brother had my back when he saw somebody really slam my woman's book and gave it a 1 star because you had to give it a star just to rate it. And he said it didn't even deserve the 1 star. He bought it for his friend, who's a yoga teacher, who has even studied in India. And they said the book was terrible, you know. And then my brother got in on like he really slammed it, a long slamming, when he didn't even read the book himself. So my brother, who's a lawyer, he's like, hey, wait a minute, because he's like, facts. First of all, you didn't read the book. How can you even rate it? And because somebody went to India doesn't mean anything. And it clearly states in my book, this is for yoga practitioners in the Iyengar school. You know, I can't just, let me use your ballet. Like, you did a certain type of ballet. It was classical ballet, but you can't just go to the Bolshoi. You can't. So, okay, the book is out there, but I sell it privately, basically. And obviously people are getting it. I know people are even pirating it, which is unfortunate because, you know, people work their hearts and souls into producing a book and then somebody pirates it and they get nothing from it when they spent so much time, effort, and decades. So I can't do anything about that, but it kind of would give Iyengar Yoga a bad name, like this reviewer, because they didn't have that foundation, first of all, of just Iyengar Yoga. That has to be there. You know, therapy is a part of what we do. The yoga philosophy is a part of what we do. It's all, it's so rich what we do. So, but that foundation has to be there. The asana pranayama even makes you prepared for the philosophy. It's not easy to study philosophy. And yeah, so for somebody to be able to shapeshift and think of how to take that classic pose, you know, because I'll see a student's body, where it needs to go, and then I'll kind of visualize what needs to go underneath them to support it. You know, and yes, we do go through things. This is cross bolsters, you know, this is a basic setup, or this is Viparudakarani. This is a basic setup, you know, but how you modify it for the individual, you have to open your consciousness for that. And hopefully an Iyengar yoga practitioner will, but you know, I can't stop people from buying my books outside of Iyengar yoga. And I would think to other schools to look at my books, like this woman who was a yoga teacher going to India, she knows everything, couldn't understand my book, and then her friend slams it. You know, so it could give Iyengar yoga a bad name, I guess, but I can't worry about that. It's not effective. So, but it's an interesting point. My books are really for students of Iyengar yoga, and I think most of them are getting those books. It doesn't really matter what maybe it will draw them, you know, to Iyengar yoga. That would be great. Wow, this is really amazing. I want to learn more. Just like when I saw Light on Yoga for the first time, I was already doing yoga. Somebody knew I was doing yoga, a friend, and they gave me this book and I was blown away. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I just started following the book and never went to any class until I learned BKS Iyengar Yoga was a living, breathing teacher. I was like, okay, I'm going there.
Well, Lois, I think that the threshold today between people finding out about something, learning that thing, and teaching that thing is really very low. And especially in the non-Iyengar community where there isn't really any sort of stipulations between what you can teach from what you can't teach. And so I think that, you know, I've struggled privately thinking about the wealth of wisdom that is within you and the wealth of wisdom that's within your books. And knowing that it's really kind of open for public consumption. And granted, it's not my issue because it's not my books, but I think that I've personally felt very protective about you and about your teachings, but also about Iyengar Yoga and about the teachings of Iyengar Yoga. And I remember our first meeting, I had said to you, you know, I was studying Iyengar Yoga with this person, and, you know, in Jamaica, everyone does Iyengar Yoga because of this person, and this was my background. And I basically was asking you to convince me as to why I needed to become a certified Iyengar Yoga teacher. If, look at me, I'm at a convention, I don't have to be certified. Or look at me, you know, I'm here next to you, I don't have to be certified. And you
I
said,
certainly could not look at you because you just put yourself in my face. Hi, Lois. You were like flying high.
I was. But one of the things you said to me,
You were
Lois,
as happy as a dog with two tails.
I was. And one of the things you said to me, Lois, was you said, Mychal, you could take as many workshops as you want. You can go to as many conventions as you want. But unless you choose to dedicate yourself to this path, you will never have a container within yourself to really receive and hold this information. Another goosebumps moment, because I didn't know that could exist. And I knew that I went to Cuba because I wanted to study Cuban ballet. And I went to Cuba because I wanted to study the Cuban modern technique. And I knew that I could only get that from being in Cuba and dedicating myself to that. But it never occurred to me that yoga and this experience of yoga could be so specific that Iyengar yoga was built in that same way, that unless I literally chose to completely absorb this system into myself, I would never have the container, no matter how many books I bought, no matter how many videos I downloaded, no matter how many, anything I watched, I would never have the internal thing to receive and hold that information, and then again, open my mouth and disseminate that information to people. So, I mean, years later, as I look back in retrospect, and as I look at the wider yoga community, and I see the wider yoga community wanting to hold Iyengar yoga information and not being able to, or wanting to teach, you know, this is how you use the belt, and this is how you do Pinchamayurasana. Because there was a while when I was teaching in a lot of non-Iyengar spaces, and you pretty much said to me, Mychal, why are you wasting your time? And I was like, because everybody menstruates and everybody needs to know this information and everybody needs to have this information within them. And you said, well, Mychal, if you have the time to waste your time, then go and waste it. But as for me and my household, I'm going to focus on my student population. And I really was resentful about that for a while. And then I found that when I went back to those same places where I had taught a year earlier, the people, and after my blood, sweat, and tears, the people, they went back to the overarching shape of their previous practice, because unless you choose to plug yourself into the system, no amount of dipping in and dipping out. It's a psychological shift. You have to psychologically give yourself over to
I don't think your work was for naught, because, you know, I bet maybe some of those students must have tapped into Iyengar yoga, so you did grunt work basically, and it wasn't rewarding, but maybe somebody, maybe one person even, that would be worth it, would have found that light, don't you think?
I think so, but I think nowadays I am more of the perspective that you shared with me, where you said, and another thing that you said that I'll never forget is you said, Mychal, you should really just focus on your students and focus on where you are and where they are and teach those students, and leave the world, let the world be the world, but teach the students who come to you. And at this moment, the only thing I'm doing. I'm only teaching the people who come to me because I realize that those people, they've been taking class since the beginning of the pandemic and they're still taking class today. And those people are the ones who have the ability to hold what I'm sharing with them and what you've shared with me within their bodies and their minds and their hearts. So I just want to say to you, Lois,
That's
thank you.
great.
Thank
You know,
you.
what I'm noticing is, you know, one of the benefits of being online is I'm able to help so many students, more students than I ever would have been helping before. And it's been a year now. And I am noticing, especially for the inversions, I don't have to teach as much. I'm seeing them in their boxes. You know, they have plumb lines, they have parallel lines. More and more, the students who have stuck with me through this year-long online teaching are getting better. And I could see that. And it's so amazing. It's so amazing. It's really, it really speaks to my heart. It's like, wow, look at them. You know, and then maybe there's one person or two people sticking out. Maybe they're new or, you know, they struggle. I'll still give them that Rajasic thing, you know, so they can join the band. Well, that's what Guruji would see. You know, he'd be teaching. I remember it was the Ann Arbor, Michigan Convention, 1993. And I don't know, there were 1,000 people in there in this huge gym. It was a mega class. And he's teaching and he sees a woman, you, in the pink short,
shirt.
far back corner. But he got the feel that everybody's playing the same note. Oh, but there's somebody off key over there. And I see that on the screen. You know, I can see, okay, somebody's not playing the same note. They need a little bit more of that Rajasic oomph, you know, to get them into their own true form and have that discipline that achieves freedom. Without the discipline, you can't get freedom.
Well, I'm so grateful for you, Lois, and I'm also so grateful for this practice because I think that a big part of why the teaching has been that this profound during the pandemic is because of the clarity with which Iyengar Yoga teaches us to organize information within ourselves and also make sure that we can impart that information in a way that makes sense. And I think that the clarity
and we
that
feel connected to each other.
Yeah.
Even though, okay, it's online, but I feel the energy through, I connect with these little boxes on my screen. I feel so connected and attached. Who would have thought that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I thank you for doing the work that you're doing. You're doing a great job. I really love how you're interviewing long-term teachers who have been in this method for decades and decades, because it's important that you record their legacies. And I think that's a really important contribution that you're doing for our community. And I thank you. Yeah. And you're a very good interviewer.
Well, thank you so much, Lois. And to those of our viewers and listeners who, if this is your 100th time joining us here on the Mychal Bryan podcast, or if this is time number 1, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for continuing to come and share in this virtual online mindfulness space with us. I receive your love and I receive your encouragement and I receive your feedback and your support. So if you want to continue to be a part of the magic and the momentum that we're building here on the show, please do, yes, like this video, as well as subscribe to the Mychal Bryan podcast. And as always, share this interview with your other yoga loving and mindfulness loving friends, because more and more people in the world need to hear from amazing teachers like Lois Steinberg. So until next time, I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, leaving you in peace and love and hope. Until we meet again, have a good one. Bye-bye. Lois Steinberg.
Mychal, I wanted to say I like your hair, by the way. I during the interview, I was like, oh, I gotta tell Mychal how much I like your hair. When you were interviewing Patricia, I really liked it. I think this is a good one. And who's 6 kind of watches and participates in some of the classes at 6. So it's great. He knows all about uteruses and vaginas and the menses and the fibroids and the 6-year-old knows everything about a woman's body and all the disasters that happen. He's very precocious in that area. And he also, the other day in class, she was doing, during the women's class, the first 15 minutes, she had to do knee stuff. And he's putting the sandbag on her feet. And then he's got his back to her feet when she's got the buttocks to the wall and he's pushing it. He's only friggin' 6 and he's really small. He's becoming her assistant. And you know, like when she has to, you have to have the legs up and the buttocks down for the end of the period when you have a heavy bleeding. And, you know, he's pulling the cone for her. It's great. Okay, so menses. Menses is on the program.
Okay, do you have something to cover up with?
Oh, no, I'm not that cold. I just, you know, I'm do I need to be asana ready?
No, I mean, and I'm also going to add it as well. So if there's like a change period, it's fine. Let me just make sure that
I have a hole in my shirt. Oh.
I only just saw it when you pointed it out.
I got this in Helena, Montana at a thrift store.
Oh, well, at least your nipple isn't leaking. Okay, let's see.